Welcome to week 4 lecture. Today we will talk about FBA again. We will review a little bit and then we'll talk about BIP, Behavior Intervention Plan, and then we'll talk about how to graph your intervention data for your final project. And then I'll introduce step 2, your practicum report. So we'll introduce the documents you need to complete for this assignment. Let's review the process of FBA and BIP. So you need to gather information about the challenging behaviors. So you can do interview, or you can use rating scale, or you can do ABC analysis, or scatter plot. And then you will come up with summary statements. It's called hypothesis, right? So you will come up with a hypothesis, and then you have to test to see if your hypothesis is true. And then those information will be linked to the intervention plan. It's called BIP. So that's the things we are going to talk about today. So the last step of FBA is to develop BIP, Behavioral Intervention Plan. So you will link the FBA information to develop BIP. So each BIP must include setting events, antecedents, problem behavior, and consequence information. The BIP, Behavioral Intervention Plan, is also known as Behavior Support Plan. So let's see the path. So this is a pathway. When you develop behavior intervention plan, this is the first thing you need to do. You need to complete these competing behavior models, the upper part, and then you will develop behavior support planning. That's BIP. So this whole thing is called BIP. So you will fill out this based on the result of FBA. So you will have your hypothesis. So you will use that information to fill these boxes out. So you know the setting events, antecedents of the problem behavior, and then the consequence. You can also identify the function after the consequence. And then this desired behavior is what's supposed to be happen. For example, if the antecedent is teacher present worksheet, then the desired behavior would be completing the worksheet, right? That's what we want to see, and that's the desired behavior. And the maintained consequence, maybe teacher provides some social praise, or student will have free time after, and then other possible consequence may be having additional work. So that's maintaining consequence of the desired behavior. And then the acceptable or alternative behavior is must be the equivalent behavior, the functionally equivalent behavior of problem behavior, because it's alternative behavior, and this alternate behavior should cause the same consequence as a problem behavior. So when the students see that antecedent, if the student complete this alternate behavior, the student must be able to get the same consequence as a problem behavior. But this one must be socially appropriate behavior. Let's say the problem behavior is screaming, and the function was to escape the task. Then acceptable alternative behavior could be asking for a break, or if the student is nonverbal, then he can show the communication card saying I need a break. Then that can be alternate behavior, right? Another example, if problem behavior is to refuse work and talk out to get teacher's attention, then acceptable behavior might be asking for teacher's help or asking feedback from teachers. Um, so the students still get teacher's attention by doing these type of acceptable alternative behaviors. So based on this information, you can develop BIP, the bottom part. So what you're going to do for this week and your final project step 4 is this. So you will, after you identify setting events, you will develop setting events manipulation plan. So you can modify, you can alter um, setting events. Also, you can alter, change antecedents to prevent problem behavior from occurring. You can also consider direct behavior teaching strategy. Also, you can provide some consequence-based intervention as well. So let's talk about this. So we talk about functional equivalence. So your intervention, behavior intervention, must match the functional problem behavior. So we are going to focus on alternate behavior. We will teach the alternate behavior first. So the student must be able to get the same function, same consequence by completing alternate behavior. But the alternate behavior must be in a socially appropriate form. Remember, right? So this is the example hypothesis statements from FBA. So um, this is for Erica, and this teacher identified the setting events, antecedent, problem behavior, and consequence, and also function. So this hypothesis includes every information. Based on the information, you can develop this type of pathway. So this is a pathway for Erica. From your reading, we have learned that we want to make problem behavior irrelevant, ineffective, and inefficient. We can do that by manipulating setting events, antecedents, or consequence. Or you can actually teach the alternate behavior first and then eventually desired behavior. So this is a whole BIP. So after you complete FBA and then pathway, you will develop BIP, the intervention plan, the bottom part, the bottom 4 columns. So to fill out these intervention plan, well, if you know many teaching strategy, it will be much easier for you to develop the plan, right? And there are so many intervention strategy identified already, like social story intervention, priming, prompting, um, reinforcement, such things. And for example, if for example, priming and prompting, those type of intervention can be used as antecedent intervention because you intervene before the problem behavior occurs. So that can be considered as antecedent-based intervention. However, you can just simply alter and change the setting events and antecedents. Please, let's take a look at this Erica's behavior. So, Erica's setting events is no peer contact in past 30 minutes, and then the setting events intervention strategy identified by this teacher is is very simple. She will just reschedule independent work time after lunch or recess instead of just before lunch and recess. So the teacher wants to satisfy and provide enough peer contact. Uh, so she wants to prevent the problem behavior from occurring. So that can be a simple setting event intervention. Before we move on, let's practice. Let's fill out the pathway, the upper part for any. So this is example hypothesis for any. So you will see setting events, antecedents, behavior, and function. So using this information, please fill out the upper part of the BIP, the pathway, and you can also identify the desired behavior and alternate behavior. You can come up with your own. And please upload your response to Blackboard. So I just want to give you some example intervention strategy. These are just example. So when you develop your own, you can come up with your own. So here's the first example. So if the problem behavior maintained to gain something, to gain tangible things like preferred item or activity, the possible antecedent strategy is social story intervention. So you can read the story so you can prevent the problem behavior from occurring, and you can direct teach appropriate behavior. So you can use communication cards. So you will teach um, appropriate behavior. And the consequence strategy might be extinction. So challenging behavior will be ignored, but appropriate behavior will be praised. So this is the second example. Um, if the problem behavior maintained to gain someone's attention, setting events strategy or antecedent strategy can be satiation. So you provide enough attention before the problematic routine start. Or you can directly teach um, the alternate or desired behavior while problem behavior ignored. And consequence strategy, maybe you can use systematic reinforcement schedule. We'll talk about this schedule later. So that can be a consequence. Another example, if the problem behavior maintained to gain something, then for antecedent strategy, you can provide let of choices of preferred item, or you can directly teach using some direct teaching strategy like communication card or priming something. And then consequence strategy can be positive reinforcement, such things. So this is the last example if the problem behavior maintained automatically, which means the function of challenging behavior is self-stimulation. Then you can use the satiation as an antecedent strategy, so the child can play with something, or a child is allowed to engage in self-stimulatory behavior like hand clapping for 10 minutes before problematic routine starts. The student can be satiated before the child's doing something. And you can directly teach the appropriate behavior using whatever strategy you have while the challenging behavior is ignored. You can also use differential reinforcement as consequence strategy. So when the child does not exhibit the hand clapping behavior, the self-stimulatory behavior for 1 minute, the child will receive a token. So using token economy, and you can gradually increase the the time. So first 1 minute, the next time 1 and 30 second, 1 minute and 30 seconds. You can gradually increase the time to get the token. So that's differential reinforcement. This is an example. You can refer to it when you developed your own BIP for your own student, but these are not the absolute example. You can develop your own based on the situation and contextual needs. You have your. Now I want to introduce this step 2 assignment. We are going to use this functional behavioral assessment screening form. The form is available online on Blackboard. As you can tell, we are in the very beginning stage. So after you get to know about your students and the behavior, um, we are going to use this screening form. This is informal. After you have some observations, you will fill out the form. So there will be no correct, incorrect answers for the form. This is just screening form, so based on your observation and knowledge about your students and behavior, you will fill out the screening. So the form is available online, and we are in the very beginning stage for FBA. Now we'll talk about how to graph your intervention data. After you developed FBA and BIP, you will deliver one or two or more intervention strategy from your BIP. So you want to decrease the use of challenging behavior, and you want to promote the use of alternate appropriate behavior for your students, right? And from SPED 514, you must learn about single case research design, right? Let's briefly review the design, and then we'll talk about how to graph your intervention data. Well, research design guide researcher and teachers to collect data. For example, if you use group design, you want to see the difference between treatment groups and control group through the treatment. You deliver interventions to the treatment group, and you're not going to deliver an intervention to control group, and you want to see the difference, right? When we use single subject design, or called single case research design, we want to see the behavior change of each individual before and after intervention. So you want to focus one or few individuals rather than group, and you want to see the effectiveness of one intervention or more intervention within each. So this is a methodological term. Single case research design requires functional relation. Independent variable is always intervention, and dependent variable is always target behavior. So for your final project, the target behavior must be the alternative acceptable behavior, right? Functional relation is established when you see a consistent effect on a dependent variable, which is your target behavior, by systematically manipulating on intervention, like independent variable. So when you introduce if intervention, if the behavior goes up or down, and that means an experimental control is observed. If you see more than 3 experimental control, then we say functional relation is established. So for this is an example of AB design. A phase is always baseline. B phase is the intervention. So this researcher had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 baseline session before she introduced the intervention, which is positive attention. And then when she introduced the intervention, which is positive attention, behavior goes up, which is social interaction. The frequency of social interaction goes up with the intervention. So the one experimental control is observed, right? And after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 intervention sessions, the researcher redraw the intervention and went back to baseline session. So without intervention during the baseline, the second baseline, the behavior went down, right? So we also see another experimental control at this moment. And then when she reintroduced the intervention, behavior slowly went up, and we see another experimental control at that point. So we see 1, 2, 3 experimental control. So we say the functional relation is established. So that's the methodological term. Single case research design include these sub-designs like A-B design, A-B-A-B, changing criterion, multiple baseline, and alternating treatments design. There are so many others. You must learn these in SPED 514, so I'm not going to go over. However, for your final project, we are going to use A-B design. It's called teacher's design because it's simple. You don't have to redraw the intervention, so it's easy to use. Again, A phase is always called baseline. Baseline, you must have 3 points, at least 3 stable baseline points to move on to intervention phase. So intervention, whatever intervention you're using, it's called B phase. So by introducing the intervention, you'll be able to see behavior change, or you may not. Depends on the intervention you're using. B phase is always intervention. A phase is always baseline. But if you are using the second intervention strategy, it will be called C phases. So A-B design is a basic single subject design, only has 2 phases, A and B. When you have stable baseline established, you can move on to intervention session and you will provide more than 6 intervention sessions. It's very simple. However, methodologically, you cannot achieve establish functional relation because you're not going back to baseline and you don't reintroduce intervention. You don't replicate those phases, right? So you cannot establish functional relation, but it's simple. You can use this in design at school. It's convenient. So this is an example of an A-B design. As you see, there are 5 baseline sessions and 5 intervention sessions. After this researcher established stable baseline, she moved on to intervention session. And the dependent variable was correct response on reading assignment. So you will implement your intervention in this way using A-B design, and you will record your data and you will graph your data. That will be your final project. So when you interpret your graph, you need to consider 3 things: level, trend, variability. So level is the mean of data within a condition. So you will get the mean of baseline and you will get the mean of intervention and you can compare. Trend is a slope or patterns of change over time. So Uh, you can say positive trends, negative trends, or flat trends. So you will analyze the trends within a condition. So baseline condition and intervention phase condition. Variability is a degree to which the data is dispersed from the mean or slope during a phase. Um, so you will see how much the data is fluctuating within a condition, within a baseline, within an intervention phase. So here's several example graphs. You are going to use the terms of level, trends, and variability to interpret a graph. So for example, let's take a look at the very first graph. There is obvious change in level. The baseline mean is really low compared to intervention phase, and the trend is flat in baseline and also flat in intervention. And there is very low variability in each phases. So we can tell the intervention was really effective, right? So you will use those terms level, trend, variability to determine and to interpret your graph and effects of the intervention you want to use. We will always visualize your data using graph so you can easily interpret your uh, data. So here's the example. So in a graph, you must include several elements. You must have x-axis, y-axis, and you have to label it. And then you have to label the whole graph using your student name and target behavior. For example, in this graph, the label of this graph is Jerry's social interaction initiation. So this person's target behavior can be the title of this graph. And you must include the line to distinguish two phases, baseline and intervention. And you also need to label each phase, baseline and intervention with your actual intervention name. So for example, in this graph, I use verbal prompts as my intervention strategy. So the intervention phase was labeled as verbal prompts. So this is the example graph. Now I'll explain you how to use Excel to graph an A-B design.